way now here in this, was it 10:40 or 11:40 time slot. We're going to go through, I'm going to read your bio, and then we're going to ask you a series of questions for the kids watching throughout Western Mass.
Thank you.
So LaTonia is also a Springfield School Committee member, as well as an adjunct professor at Westfield State University. Having graduated from Springfield Central High School and receiving a bachelor's degree in business management and marketing from Elms College, she earned a certificate of board in governance and a master's degree in nonprofit management and philanthropy from Bay Path University. She was elected to the Springfield School Committee in 2018. LaTonia is experienced in educational supports, convening and community strategies, grant management, and facilitation. She is passionate about high-quality education for all students. She was also recognized as a under 40 recipient by BusinessWest. She was also named to the class of 2020 Commonwealth Unsung Heroine. LaTonia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So first question is, I know I just kind of went through a little bit of your career path. Can you share with everyone here today kind of more in depth of your career path and how you got to this point today?
Wow, that's such a great question, and it's such a complicated response that I have to that question. So my journey really started with me being inspired by my grandmother to go to college. So I'm a first-gen college student. I went to Elms College out in Chicopee on a full scholarship, and it was one of the best experiences that I've ever had. Following that, I did end up at an internship at institution, or actually organization in Connecticut that my aunt was working at, and she got me an internship, a paid internship. So I was excited to have a paid internship while in college. And I spent my first few years of utilizing my bachelor's in business administration there. But I didn't enjoy it. I was there in body, but I knew that there was more that I needed to do. And so basically from that standpoint, I said, I'm volunteering a lot. I was volunteering 20, 30 hours a week between my church, doing things in the community. And I made the decision to go back to school, get my master's in nonprofit management philanthropy. I ended up at a local nonprofit, and that is kind of where my civic and community service world kind of met. And from there, I just do what I do. I started two nonprofit organizations, one that I'm still deeply involved in, the other that I work with from time to time. And then I also got into higher ed after the nonprofit and expanded my role just a little bit more. So it wasn't intentional that I ended up where I am now. But one thing that I always have loved to do is teach. So I knew that teaching in some capacity would be in my life, but I didn't know to what extent. And so, like I said, it's very long, very complicated, not intentional, but it was about me kind of following my heart's desire of what I love to do and what I enjoy to do as far as helping people and relating to people.
That's so great. So within all of that, what are some of your success habits that you hold yourself to ensure that you're able to accomplish all those things you just listed off?
Well, one thing that I tell people whenever they ask me how is it that I do what I do and manage all that I do. So what folks also don't know is my first job that's most important to me is being a mom and a wife. And I have 4 beautiful children that are all school aged, 2 in high school now. And I have a husband I've been married to as of yesterday for 19 years. So those are very important things to me. And so I believe having some grounding and some moral compass, things that really hold you true to who you are so important because you have to have integrity. You have to be able to look in the mirror at the end of the day and know that you like who you saw, and when you wake up the next day, you're still proud of who you are. The other thing that I believe in is learning something new every day. If I didn't learn something that day, I make sure I do before I go to bed, because it's important to me that in order to continue to grow and develop, that you are always getting new information, learning something new, learning a new technique, because that helps to expand your mind and also expands your pathway of where you can go.
Absolutely. So with all those great successes that we have, there's always times of opportunity. The question reads, over your career, any mistakes that you've made that you've been able to learn from that have been able to help you to excel in your career?
Absolutely. One mistake that I made in the very beginning was not knowing how to set boundaries. There was a time when I said yes to everything. And the good part of it is I learned how to do a lot of things. I have a lot of skills that people don't know that I have. For example, I know how to do a lot of technology stuff. And when I work with my nonprofit that I co-founded, they were like, oh, who did your video? Who did that? Well, I did. I learned how to do that stuff. So that's good. But the flip side of it is that when you learn so many things, sometimes you spread yourself too thin and you can burn out. And so I did burn out earlier in my career just because I didn't know how to say no. And once I learned the art of saying no, and not all the time, but being very strategic and when I can say yes and when I can say no, that has helped me a lot with avoiding going back into a burnout phase.
Absolutely. So with that being said, you know, being a leader in many aspects of your life, in the community and at home and within your roles as all the jobs you have had, what do you think it takes to become a good leader?
I think being a good leader means being a good follower first. A lot of people want to tell people what to do and they want to dictate, but they don't understand what it takes to be able to humble yourself under somebody else's leadership and guidance and trust somebody else. And when you become a good follower, then you understand what it is for people to really follow you. So people who have followed me and stood by me and with me in some of the hardest things that I've ever dealt with, I greatly appreciate their dedication and loyalty because I know what it takes. And I've been under some really good leaders along my path. And so I think that it's very important for folks to have that level of humility to be a good leader. But I also think that there comes with a level of empathy. You have to be able to, if you can't have compassion because you don't understand it always, no, if you can't have empathy because you don't understand it always, then you have to have compassion. So that's what I meant to say. And that you haven't always experienced what other people experience, so you don't know what they're going through. But when you have the compassion, then you're willing to try to stretch yourself to be in their shoes and be able to treat people with a certain level of respect at all times. I never look at somebody's position. I remember I used to be a secretary and people used to treat me nice or treat me mean. And I remembered how that felt being a secretary. So I never, ever go to somebody who's an administrative professional and overlook them. I always learn their names. I always want to know who they are. And I take the time to build relationships with everyone because everybody is important. And whenever you get to a place where you don't value people, then even if you call yourself a leader, you're not a good one, because good leaders value people in all ages and stages, and all relationships are truly important to them, and making sure that they're leaving a lasting impression on folks.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So what are some of the changes that you think the next generation is going to be facing? You have a mother of four, clearly see this on a daily basis, but for some of those kids in the classroom right now watching this,
Yes.
what do you think the challenges are?
I think one of the things, there's a lot of things, you're right, and we don't have enough time to talk about all those things that our generations that are viewing are going to face. But what I would say is that our next generation of students and leaders really need to understand what accountability means, and knowing that there's a certain level of respect that you have to bring to the table. I know that you all come with a lot of great ideas, but you also have to come with a lot of reverence and patience, because even if we don't all do it the way you want us to, we've worked really hard to get where we are. And that experience is a teacher that you're not going to be able to get from a textbook or a Google site. So I think that there needs to be this level of understanding that even though you are so wise in all that you do and very strategic in a lot of things that you want to do in ways that we never imagined because we didn't have the tools that you have access to, that there's still some level of value that comes from living through what we've lived through. I also think that you have to be careful about how much you rely on technology, because it can stifle your thinking process and your willingness to build relationships, because it becomes so easy to do certain things. And so those are challenges that I think a lot of young people don't think about until they have to pick up the phone and call somebody and actually talk to somebody. And then it's a very difficult way to communicate because they don't do that often. So challenge yourself to still honor some of those tools that we've used, and people that even may be older than I, because those tools still work and they still are valued in a lot of settings. And also don't forget your manners. because I think that mirrors go where sometimes your skills can't take you. And my grandmother taught me that as a child, and I never forgot that. I always say please and thank you. And so that's something that a lot of times, unfortunately, I don't get from the younger generation. They're not always so quick. And I'm not saying that generalization. I'm just saying my experience is just reminding folks, use your manners. Just say thank you. Just say please. It really goes a long way. And it sounds very simple, but it really can take you far.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know this last question is only a couple years removed from you, but if you can go back and give some advice to your 16-year-old self, what would that be?
You're so kind. It's been a long time since I was 16, but if I could give my 16-year-old self advice, I would say to really, this is funny because I've done this for a long time and I learned this from my Nana. I would say my Nana was the smartest person in my life and she didn't have a high school education. So I would say not to value people based on the educational status that they have or even the amount of money that they have. Really look at people according to their character and allow those wonderful characteristics that people have to really help shape you to who it is that you want to be when you grow up. And I did that, but I did it longer than I should have. I wish I would have done it when I was 16, 17, 18, but it took me a little longer than that to really understand what that means and the value in that. And so I would tell myself that, and I would also tell myself just to be mindful of setting boundaries and knowing who to keep close to you, who means well for you, who's going to help you along your path, and who can you glean from and pour into their life, but also who's not good for you and who may be toxic, whether it be personally or business-wise, and what to do in order to look out for those things. I can't hear you, Justin.
One of those things. If I go back to my 16-year-old self, and you make sure to always unmute yourself when you're on Zoom calls. I mean, it happens.
Exactly.
This is my first Zoom call ever, so not the 1,000th one in the last 8 months. So you would have thought I already know that, but clearly not.
That's okay.
So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you can come forward in your class and ask those questions now. LaTonia, is there anything that you would want to leave all the students watching today in terms of a piece of advice while they're getting all of their questions ready for you?
I would just say, you're your own worst enemy. I tell people that all the time. You're your own worst enemy, and that you can prevent yourself from achieving goals that you set. And you could also be the person to help you to reach those goals. And so just be mindful of, the negative talk that sometimes will try to enter in because you might get frustrated or discouraged about something. Know that, there's people out there that care about you and love you, and find those people that care about you and love you. My best friends are all 10 and 15 years older than me, and people laugh when I say that, but I've been intentional because I know that they've experienced things that I've never experienced, and they understand life in a way that I don't understand it. And so they've been able to give me advice that has really helped me in ways that I can only imagine had I not taken in some of the loving care and guidance that they've given me. So just be intentional with that.
Absolutely.
I have one for you.
Yes.
What kind of advice would you give to young people who are thinking about politics and running? You had to run for the school committee seat.
I did. It was a very challenging run, as you remember. It was an open seat, so it was a lot of people running for that seat. What I would say is, if you're thinking about going into politics, make sure you know why you're going into politics. Don't just want to go into it because you're going to have influence or you'll be able to sit in seats with people that do great things or what have you, but really, really want to do it because you want to impact and influence, whether it be your community or your state or whatever level of government that you plan to run for. Because when you do it for the right reasons and you're passionate about it, people will surround you, they will support you, they will invest in you so that you can reach your goals, because they know that you're gonna do what's best for the community and what's best for the people. That's my biggest thing that I say to folks. it is definitely a lot of work knocking on doors. It's a lot of work meeting people. It's a lot of work remembering names. But most of all, it's a lot of work to get the job done because there's a lot of systemic structures that you got to fight against. And if you don't have a heart to want to change things, it will not happen. You'll just sit back and do like a lot of other folks do and just collect a stipend. And that's not going to help anybody if that's what you do when you get there.
Well, committee woman, thank you so much for all you do for the city of Springfield,
Thank you.
your employment, your students, your family, and the community as a whole. So really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate knowing you and appreciate you.
All righty. Well, thank you very much. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
All right. Bye-bye.
Next up.